We are live, Peter.
Happy Friday, everybody. This is Buy, Sell, Hold Miami. It's a no nonsense conversation about some of the biggest stories going on in the South Florida condo market with a real focus kind of on economics as well as the real estate market. We're going to give you a perspective from two locals, been on the ground for north of 30 years each. We're going to straight talk. We're not necessarily going to agree on everything, but at the end of the day, hopefully, you're going to, you'll have some opinions on stuff. We're not going to tell you what to think, but we will tell you our thoughts so you can decide what makes the most sense and what doesn't. The way we're going to do it is we're going to go through 5 articles. We handpicked them. We're going to kick them back and forth. We're going to decide, is it a buy, is it a sell, or is it a hold? All that being said, let me go ahead and turn it over. Oh, by the way, my name is Peter Zalewski. I'm a condo consultant. I also have a company called Miami Condo Investing Club. Check out my website, miamicondo.club. And my co-host on this podcast, and remember, every Friday, 4 p.m. South Florida time, is Daniel Hernandez. He is a veteran real estate professional with Compass. He does single family as well as condominiums. How's that for an intro, Daniel?
That is a great intro. You are too kind to me, Peter. I'm not that old. I don't know if I could be qualified as a veteran, but I'll take it.
Experienced, seasoned.
Experience, sure. But I don't want to parrot too much off of what you got to say. We have a lot to talk about today, and I just want to jump into it. The format, as Peter said, we got 7 minutes to talk about each one of these topics. If we go into overtime, that's okay. We've allocated time for that. But to jump in with the first topic, Peter, your office is in this area, right on the bay. Tell me a little bit about what you see going on in the Central Business District, and to sort of map it out for everybody watching. If the Central Business District in Miami, we have everybody talks about Brickell, the Wall Street of the South. Well, Brickell is south of the Miami River, and then once you go north of the Miami River, you have downtown, and that carries you all the way till, well, they're putting up that signature bridge project, which is that first Miami Beach exit that takes you alongside the cruises. And in there is what, the Downtown Development Authority and the Central Business District. The brand name that they're putting on this now is Miami World Center, and there's been a ton of construction over the last 10 years, and there continues to be a lot of construction. But Peter's really well versed in all of that because that's where he hangs his hat. So Peter, what do you see going on in there?
Well, Daniel, there was some big news made within the last few weeks or so. I don't know if you can pull up the article or so because this is something that has to do with the courts. And my experience is anytime it has to do with the courts, read directly from the article and refer everything based on the article, and then we can talk outside of the article simply because I don't want to get hit with a cease and desist and or any kind of lawsuit. So I don't know if you can pull up that article.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'll pull
what
it up
what
for you right now.
Okay, so while you do that, why don't you why don't you let me kind of give you a perspective? Like Daniel said, the Central Business District, that's primarily going to be where all the government entities are. When you go south of the river, so you got the Miami River basically separating Brickell Avenue area to the south, and you got Central Business District to the north. All the government stuff is going to be north of the river. All of the professional service stuff is going to be south of the river. Generally speaking, it's all part of this greater downtown Miami area. Give you an idea, there's 204 condo projects, about 59,000 units. Now, what we're seeing is the biggest amount of new construction going on in the Central Business District. It'll be about a 16-block stretch. By the way, the eastern boundary is the Bay. The western boundary is going to be Interstate 95. So in this 16-block stretch where you have Bayside, you have Museum Park, you have the Casella Center, which at one time was called the American Airlines Arena, where the Miami Heat operates. This is where a lot of stuff's going up. We got 4,800 units and 12 new condo projects going up in 16 blocks.
Wow.
Prior to this boom in the last 5 years, there were about 9,000 units, 9,200 units or so ballpark. So we're going to add 50% to our overall supply. Now, this is only condos. This excludes all of the rentals, and most of the stuff going up in and around there is going to be rental related. It'll be real estate investment trust type of stuff. It'll be private corporate landlords, if you will. But what caught our attention is this article. And this article is coming from the Real Deal. So anybody out there is involved, do not send us a cease and desist. Do not send us any kind of lawsuit. We're going to point directly to the Real Deal. Let me just read that headline real quick. It says financial sabotage in quotes coming from the Real Deal. Dan Kazi, Legacy's Miami World Center developer. It doesn't say developer, but I'm going to fill that word in there in case you don't know Dan Kazi. Dan Kazi's Legacy Miami World Center tied up in foreclosure and a countersuit. What is a foreclosure? A foreclosure is a situation where a creditor basically moves on and or a mechanic, construction, they move on a project for non-payment. That's basically what it is. Basically, it's paperwork. Sometimes it's used for negotiating strategies, tactics. But basically, this one project called Legacy that's going up right there on what is that Northeast First. It's going on Northeast First, right across from the sister project, which is called Paramount Miami World Center, which Dan Codzi built. Just got hit with a foreclosure. I was by that site this week. We had one of our meetups for the Miami Condo Investing Club, and we were looking at it. Nothing's being done. You got a tower standing probably 12 stories tall. You got one crane on. I'm not sure if the other crane was taken off. It kind of looked like that, but don't hold me to it. I saw the base of the crane, but the top of it, the T part of the T crane was gone. But nothing's going on. So the question becomes, is this the start? Is this the beginning of something that's going to be going on in this central business district? Again, 12 condo projects, including this Legacy, adding 4,800 units within 16 block stretch from north to south. So basically, you walk a mile, you're going to get hit with all of these units. And I will tell you, there's roughly about 1.5 people per unit times 4,800. That gives you some context as to what kind of supply we're talking about. And it's in addition to all the rental projects going up. And our friend Adam Newman, not our friend, but speaking just in large terms, the gentleman from WeWork who built that company up and it all kind of went sideways. He's now resurfaced. He's down here in South Florida and he's become a condo developer. So he bought a pair of projects. One of them it's called Flow House. One of them he's running as a rental. That's on the east side. On the west side, the sister project, and they abut each other. That's going to be a condo conversion called Flow House Condo. So he's even down there. Everybody's playing in this, what's supposed to be Miami World Center, which, by the way, Daniel, I don't know if you remember this. Miami World Center was first announced about 2004, 2005. They had a slick little video every time you went into the sales office at the time. They were trying to put it together. It was going to be a retail. They used the theme music, the opening music from the Miami Vice TV show to show you what it was going to be like, because they were trying to replace what used to stand there. What was there before?
The
You had
Miami
Camille's
Arena.
house. Yeah, well, yeah, but you had the Camille's house over there. You had Bicentennial Park, which became Museum Park. That was basically a no-go area because all the homeless,
Well, it was
all of
called, it
the
was the MAM, right? The Modern Art Museum, the Miami Art Museum, right?
no, it was basically it was the old track for the Miami Grand Prix. Ralph Sanchez, the guy who started it, he used to run the Grand Prix through there. They used to do racing. That ultimately is what prompted them to build the Motor Speedway down in Homestead. But basically, it was a no-go zone. It was all on the waterfront. Nobody could go there. Primarily, it was homeless. It was hookers. It was drugs, all that type of stuff. So they replaced all this. And one of the paramount aspects or cornerstones was going to be this Miami World Center. 20 years ago, it's finally coming through to fruition. And everybody's going crazy putting stuff up. And apparently, one of the projects, according to the Real Deal, not me, the Real Deal, according to the headline, financial sabotage, Dan Codzi's Legacy Miami World Center, tied up in foreclosure and countersuit, according to the Real Deal. Apparently, one of the 12 is now faced with some issues.
So, Peter, I got a question for you. You have so much data about World Center or about all condos. Peter, you are very numbers oriented. And so these condos that are going up in
Yep.
this district, one of them is very famously the Waldorf Astoria. It's going to be the tallest residential tower, I think, south of New York. Um,
That's what they
where,
say. Everybody's the biggest. Everybody's the
it's the last
tallest.
piece of waterfront real estate.
Yeah. If you don't buy it, there's never going to be another. Blah 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 blah. Please
So
continue.
what's the price blend in World Center? Because I see a lot of these buildings and a lot of them sold out like hotcakes during the pandemic, and there were a
Yep.
lot of these BTR short-term rental friendly projects. 600 World Center, 500 World Center, I think is one of them called. PMG's got one, 11 West, and those are all these short-term rental projects that are Airbnb friendly, but they come in at a much lower price point. Where you have 2-3 blocks away, you have 10 Museum and Waldorf Astoria that are $2,000 square foot products. So what's the median? What's the blend here? Is this a real reflection of Miami, or is it low end and high end with no middle?
Well. Here's the interesting part. If you pull the data, or if you shop the sales office, pre-construction is going to start about 1,200 a foot. generally
Okay.
speaking. Now, this Adam Newman, who's got the tower on the west side, he's trying to do a condo conversion. I looked last week because we were doing a tour, one of our tours, so I had to do the research. And looking through the tour, he had not yet filed the condo declaration, which is necessary in order to convert a rental into a condo. Had not yet filed that, but he was trying to undercut the market, from what I'm told, coming in at just north of 900 a foot, when the rest of the new product was going to be going for 1,200 a foot. Now, you do have anecdotally, you have other projects where they're really pushing the envelope. You mentioned Waldorf Astoria. I want to say there was a story that came out about a year ago. They're looking for 120 million for a penthouse, just to give you context as to what's going on. But generally speaking, to buy in new construction, 1,200 a foot would be it'd be a good starting point. And if you look at the resale market, the average price on the resale market is about 1,012 a square foot. Now, here's the kicker. There's something called the 1% rule. Whatever the rent is represents 1% of the value. $1,000 a month rent means a $100,000 property. $10,000 a month rent means $1 million property.
$1.2 million a month for the $120 million penthouse. Anybody doing the back of the napkin math?
There you go. But what's sort of interesting to me is, in this central business district, the average ask is 1.6 million a door. The median rent they're getting, according to the realtors, and rental data is bad because REITs and private landlords, they don't
Sure.
share their information because they don't want to pay a commission. And the way people get rental data is either through a survey by calling the sales office or the leasing office, and or relying on the MLS. So according to the MLS, the median rent is $3,500 a month, and the ask is 1.6. So we have a big disconnect. So the proposition is, if you buy a condo for 1,012 a square foot, that's a resale. If you spend that $1.6 million a door, you're going to get back $3,500 a month in rent. So, and that's really where the push pull is. And those are some of the issues that are sort of coming to a head right now, given mortgage rates, given what's happening with insurance, and then given the fact that maintenance fees are they're on the rise. Some of it's necessary in new buildings, but most of it is I'd say padding, if you
But
will, by whatever entity.
in this district, and we always talk about the housing crisis and the lack of
Yep.
affordable housing. How many of these units do you think are intended for end users versus owner investors?
Yeah. So I was talking to Miami Herald about this week. So okay. So first and foremost, what's an investor and what's a user? So the way we defined it is a homestead declaration. In the state of Florida, if you are a resident, you get to claim something called a homestead. You file that, you notify the state, this is my homestead. You get added legal protections, but you also get to lock in your tax exposure in terms of what they're going to charge you for annually. And keep in mind, 2% property tax, of which a third's going to the county, a third goes to the city, and a third goes to the school board. So all of the coffers of the governmental agencies, for the most part, they're being filled by property taxes. So that's why a homestead is really good. So we did a study, and this is probably 10 years ago or so now. We looked at all of greater downtown Miami. We basically found about 1 out of every 3 units was homesteaded, meaning the other
Wow,
2
only
out of 3.
30%.
Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. Now this was before this boom we had on right now with the Californians and the New Yorkers, who all came down during the pandemic because they wanted to be in the crypto capital of the United States. They wanted to twerk on a police car, so they all came down here and they bid it up. I don't know how many are declaring homestead, how many are not, but I think it's if you wanted to ballpark it conservatively, I'd say 1 out of every 2 units is homesteaded, or 1 out of 2 units is an investor, meaning non-homesteaded, because there's nothing that requires you to file paperwork that says that you are an investor. So we
Right.
looked at it as, okay, if they file homestead, they live here. If they don't, they're an investor, even if it's a second home that they don't intend to rent.
Well, the reason why I ask is because the 1% rule you can throw out the door if it's a homesteaded property. They like
Yep.
it, they want to live in it. It's a
Yep.
utility. It's your primary residence, and you know what? In Miami, we're seeing that people are spending upwards of 40-50% of their income on housing, and it's not because they necessarily want to. Nobody wants to spend that much money on housing, but it's because, well, they have to. That's where they work. They don't want to commute an hour from Homestead or somewhere further out west or all the way up in Tamarack.
Yep.
So if it just costs what it costs, and investors are buoying the market,
Or
regardless of your
we're
1%,
booing the market,
we're
potentially.
buoying the market.
Past
But
tense.
these pre-construction projects that were rental friendly, these condominium projects. Well, let me just make something clear. There are all these condo projects you can buy as an investor and rent it out,
Yeah,
usually
traditionally
on a
twice a
6 month
year.
minimum basis.
Yeah.
Right. So twice a year, 6 month minimum. Sometimes it's a little more austere. Sometimes it's once a year, and it has to be 12 month minimum. It all depends on the condo bylaws and the governing documents of that given building. But an STR, short-term rental, or BTR, build to rent, those are Airbnb
Friendly.
specific buildings.
Yep.
They
Yep.
are for an investor to go in and say, I'm going to put this on Airbnb. I want to get a daily rate for this because the HOA, the governing bylaws, allow them to rent it daily. And effectively, it's a hotel. And every given unit can be a different little operating company. So if you're an end user in one of those buildings, it's like you're living in a hotel.
It is. It is. Well, yeah, but here's an interesting point. In running the numbers, we did a ranking which buildings have the highest concentration of units for sale and which ones have the lowest. And we use, and everybody has different numbers. We use 10%. We say every building ought to have 10% of its units available always. So 1 out of 10 should always be
That's
available. That's
healthy
just
liquidity.
yeah, that's just a regular market. So we took a look at, okay, which were the best, which, by the way, the best one with the lowest percentage is 900 Biscayne Bay, coming in about 2% of the units for sale. So that means if you go into that project and you're a listing agent, dude, you're going to sell that thing, most likely because everybody wants to be in there. And more importantly, nobody wants to sell. We also took a look at what was the worst. And this is where it ties into your short-term rental. The second highest percentage of units for sale is in a short-term rental project called Nativo / Gale Residences. Number one, by the way, if you're asking, the Aston Martin. 1 out of every 4 units in the Aston Martin is
25%, right?
currently on
Yeah,
the
I
market.
saw that. I saw
Yep.
25%. So here, and we got to jump to the next topic, but I want to ask you one more question about this. So for Fannie Mae, for a Fannie Mae mortgage, I don't know what the cutoff is, and maybe you know, but if a certain amount of units are
It's not
not
homesteaded.
is
It's
not
not a primary
homesteaded,
residence. Continue. Yep.
they won't loan on a transaction. They won't lend money to transact in that building. So it's a very careful dance that these HOAs have to play in because yes, every building wants to have a healthy number of transactions because if there's a healthy number of transactions, then people want to live in it. They know that they can sell their unit if they need to. But if you don't have enough units being lived in homesteaded, Fannie Mae says you're blacklisted.
And then you got to go to private money, and private money means that there's more risk involved. Therefore, they need to get some they
They're
need to
going to
be
jack up your
incentivized to get
interest
off the
rate.
couch and do the loan. So this is where you get jammed up.
So we're talking about renters. Well, let's buy, sell, hold on the future of the Central Business District. So everything
Well,
you've
before
seen,
you make your decision, 25 months of supply of condos in the central business district, 6 months is equilibrium.
well,
Although, if
if
you listen to Ron Sheffield from EWM, who I've known a long time, he just came out in a story and said that 9 months of supply is suddenly the new equilibrium. So, and he's a sell side guy. So, you should just sort of give you perspective. I'm a sell. I walk that area
you
with my
you
tour.
sell it,
I've
you
looked at the numbers. I'm a
sell it
hard
yesterday.
I'm a hard sell. And hands out means a sell. Hands in, I'm buying. I am dumping this market.
I gotta agree with you. The numbers are too aggressive in that direction. If you have a condo, if you're an owner investor, if you're living in it and you're having a great time and you're paying your HOA and
Yeah, you
and
got your
and
2% interest rate.
and you like where you live and you're locked into a low rate, then yeah, good for you. But if you bought this, you're not making Peter's 1%. Certainly not in this rental market. I think it's time for you to sell. I'm selling. All right, Peter. So another article that came up was that millionaires, so people making a lot of money, are renting, and this is a nationwide phenomenon. But it's happening. One of the big markets it's happening in is down here in South Florida, and then Houston, Texas, actually was another large market for this. But folks who are high income earners are opting to rent instead of buy, and that's great. Good for them. You have money, you can do whatever you want with it. You can buy, you can rent. But in certain markets like Miami and the Bay Area in particular, there aren't enough high end rentals for these folks. And guys, we're talking about 20, 30, 40, $50,000 plus a month rentals. And these are folks who could put down a few $1,000,000 for a down payment, but they're making so much money in this crazy economy because the economy is so amazing. Our stock market is doing so well. The stock market and the economy are not correlated. but the stock market's doing so well. These folks are making so much money by other means. They don't want to lock in $2 million at what, 6.5% interest rate, or if you're getting an ARM, 6% ARM for the next 30 some odd years. So where are these folks renting? Well, I think I've explained why they're renting, but is Miami going to deliver high-end product for these New York renters? The developers you talk to, are they looking at this data